Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us here for episode 25 of Ask Us Anything. I'm Mark Graban from KaiNexus, and I'm joined by
Greg Jacobson, also from KaiNexus.
So we've got a bunch of questions, and but first off, though, we don't really, well, we didn't have balloons or party favors or streamers or big balloons behind us, but this is our 25th episode. I guess that's worth at least recognizing.
Yeah, I would, a number is a number, but it's certainly a quarter of the way to a century. And I don't think when we started this experiment, we would have thought we'd be still doing this at 25 episodes and over 200 questions. I think our list is up to. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, and the first one was in November 2015, and yeah, like you said, we did it as a one-off, and the questions keep pouring in. We still have a backlog of questions. We'll keep doing that. We'll keep trying to answer as long as people keep asking, right? Do you agree, Greg? We'll keep doing them?
Absolutely. I'm checking in with our audio person to make sure our audio is coming through. That would be one of the checklist items.
All right. Yes, so we are big fans of checklists within the team at KaiNexus and what we're doing here for these sessions. So the first question, though, and it's kind of in the spirit of ask us anything. We get fun questions sometimes. Do you dress up for Halloween, Greg?
Do you dress up for Halloween, or do you admit that you're dressing up for Halloween?
Yeah, I mean, I assume they made a costume, not like putting on a suit, right?
I have gotten better since I have a daughter, but for many years it was just another day for me. And but she is very creative in her different costumes, and so last year it was a dragon, and I'm looking forward to seeing what she's gonna throw together this year. What about you, Mark? Are you dress up?
We do. We don't have kids, but we've fallen into the trend of going to Halloween or going to Halloween parties. A friend of ours has been throwing a party for a number of years. So people do fun couples costumes. My wife and I, and it amused us. I think like other frequent flyers understood the reference better than we did, but we went as zombie business travelers. We feel that way sometimes.
I was going to say, I've definitely felt that way.
So we wore, she had a pair of Qantas pajamas that they give you in business class. I had a pair of an American Airlines pajamas, kind of put dirt makeup and fake blood on them. And we had fake tattoos, and I sprayed some green stuff in my hair. And everyone else was like, what? We don't get it. I'm like, oh, okay, it makes us laugh, so that's why we did it.
I guess I haven't seen a zombie airplane scene or movie. That would be interesting. An interesting idea for a movie in general.
Zombies on a plane. That could be a follow-up to Snakes on a plane.
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, since my wife had the Qantas pajamas, we were joking that apparently the zombie outbreak started in Australia, and thanks to her flying home, she brought it home with us.
Love it.
So we did that. And unlike last year's webinar where I was in costume, no plans to do that this year. If anyone's interested in that, they can go back into the presentation webinar library.
That was out of control, Mark.
It was indeed out of control. So I'll post a link to that in the chat box. It was why metrics and statistics don't have to be scary, which I thought was a good topic, and most everyone liked the costume and the effort. Why not? Since it was done literally presented on Halloween Day last year. All right, so now the more kind of continuous improvement related content questions. So here's a question from Kristen. How important is it to have a single accepted methodology at an organization? For example, PDCA or DMAIC. My belief is that methodologies are mostly the same. However, confusion can exist with employees if we have more than one. So I'll start off and say, yeah, I agree that you understand there is that risk of confusion. I think beyond the risk of confusion, there's the risk of people thinking this is part of the flavor of the month. If the organization had really embraced one acronym or one methodology and now they're introducing another. But I think one way of trying to eliminate some of that confusion is using a really broad label that's consistent over time. So whether for you or your organization, if things like operational excellence or business performance excellence or process improvement or business transformation, you can then, I think, kind of synthesize different approaches under that common banner. You could start with small Kaizen improvements, and then you could add DMAIC, you could add maybe A3 problem solving, and you could use DMAIC as the framework for the A3 template. I think as long as you maybe kind of introduce new methods as being additive to what you've had before, that maybe mitigates some of that risk.
Yeah, I think the more consistent you can be in your methodology throughout an organization, I think the greater the chance that you're going to spread improvement and spread that behavior and culture. And so what we find is that organizations that have very fragmented pockets that have not unified along some different methodologies, or at least some different unified along different or unified with language, so you can understand what you're talking about when you're talking about a large scale A3 or something along those lines. It ends up creating silos. I mean, imagine if people were trying to speak all a different language. And one of the interesting things that we see when we're onboarding a new customer is that there is this kind of discovery process that organizations that have been doing improvement work in different pockets will discover, how do your forms look and how do you do this? And then it does foster a lot of conversation on trying to unify. I think the most important thing is just not to get hung up. There's really a whole bunch of different ways to catch a butterfly. And I think the more important thing is that the ball just keeps moving forward. So
yeah, and I think the other thing I would add about consistency, I think we can introduce new tools, if you will. Sorry, you just saw my fidget baseball that I sometimes hold and juggle while I'm talking, but I thought it was off camera and then I realized it creeped in. But it helps to have consistent principles, right? So if we have consistent principles such as, focus on the customer, try to engage everybody, engage the people that do the work, try to eliminate fear from the organization, like certain foundational bedrock principles like that hopefully stay consistent, and we can use different methodologies within that context.
I think the image that I like the most that you share is the different balls on that one slide, and it kind of shows kind of small improvements and medium scale improvements and large improvements. So I think the big thing is that you have some type of methodology. Hopefully it's consistent, that deals with small, local, quick, rapid fire changes. You have something on medium, and then you have something large scale, and then you have something that aligns them all. You're not going to have all these from day one. That's the nirvana state that you're going to, your journey is going to take you to. And the more consistent that they can be, I agree with this question. I think that there'll be a lot of rewards for that. I would probably say if people can't agree on something, I'd rather just people do something than do nothing and kind of degrade into just disagreeing on tools and nomenclature. And
well, one of the other risks is that you get turf battles within an organization. So some organizations have a combined Lean Six Sigma methodology. When I worked at the last manufacturing company I worked for 15 years ago, they had a program that they called Lean Six Sigma Plus, but they would train and certify people either in Lean, which is the path I went. There's a plaque on the wall behind me. See if I can put my finger there. There's a certification plaque there. And then you had Six Sigma people. And thankfully, that didn't break down into turf battles around, the Lean people don't want the Six Sigma people to get credit for anything. Like, that would be really dysfunctional. But I was going to show, since you mentioned that diagram, I happen to have a copy of the Executive Guide to Healthcare Kaizen here, gratuitous plug. And here's a diagram that shows different size bubbles to help illustrate small problems, medium-sized problems, big problems, and proportionally there are generally lots and lots of little improvements. Robinson and Schroeder in their research have shown there's an 80-20 rule. About 80% of the benefit to an organization comes from those smaller frontline staff-driven improvements. And the risk is that organizations that only focus on big projects or big transformational changes are losing and missing out on that potential.
Where can you read about that research? I was talking with someone recently at KaiNexus last month, and it came up, and I know it's referenced in Alan Robinson's book, but I'm sure it's referenced in other places.
Yeah, their most recent book is called The Idea-Driven Organization by Alan Robinson and Dean Schroeder.
Okay, that's where it is. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then there might be other places they've written about that or published that.
Yeah.
But you could search Robinson Schroeder 80-20 improvement, and I bet that would come up.
And it's not the Pareto 80-20.
It's coincidentally 80-20 is what they found researching multiple companies and multiple industries in different countries even. All right, so we're going to move on. We have another question from Tanya. She said, hi, I'm really interested to know, how does KaiNexus differentiate from a project management software like Monday.com or Asana? So Greg, I'll let you tackle that one.
Yeah, perfect. I get this question a lot, especially when people ask me what I do, and I explain a little bit of KaiNexus in the proverbial elevator pitch, and then the human brain likes to categorize things, and we understand something by differentiating it, and so that's kind of a natural question. And I think anytime you look at any task management, project management, any really workflow management software, there's going to be overlap, right? I mean, you're going to all log in. There's going to be either to-dos or items. I think where the main differentiation is that from the ground up, KaiNexus has been designed to help organizations do continuous improvement work, right? So there's a huge differentiation in the ability to give permissions on what you can and can't do in the system. Huge differences on notifications and notification preferences. Huge differences in how do you track and measure the impact of the work. Very different reporting suite in KaiNexus. And so when you are trying to do collaborative work with maybe 5 or 10 or 20 people, and it's not specifically continuous improvement work, you could probably use some of the types of software that you mentioned. When you start getting into doing very specific work related to improvement work, and then doing that at scale across hundreds and thousands and then tens of thousands of people, and then trying to report on that and really create the behaviors and emulate a methodology that you either had in the paper system or are creating in the digital system, you immediately start to realize that having a system that's been optimized for that is really key. I love to say that you literally could manage an entire electronic medical records in Dropbox if you wanted to. I mean, you theoretically could with folder structures.
Might not be HIPAA compliant, but you could, right?
I don't even know if Dropbox or bot, but it might not be. But I think the point is that you can use the wrong tool or platform to do things. I mean, I can use a big wrench as a hammer. It's not optimized to do that. But yeah, and I think that pretty much summarizes it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I would add, even KaiNexus started with roots in those small bubbles, the small Kaizen improvements. Customers are doing multiple levels of improvement, so they've pulled on KaiNexus to add the ability to manage and track A3s and larger projects, because it's all of the above in terms of small, medium, large. I think a lot of times something that's created as project management shows a bias toward the larger initiatives. And and sometimes this isn't just about software. This is about organizational assumptions, where I've coached a couple of organizations that had a long habit of process improvement, meaning projects. It was almost more like total quality management and quality circle projects that would go on for 6 months and a year. And that power of habit in terms of language is really challenging. So when we would start talking about small Kaizens, and they would keep calling them projects, I'm like, well, this isn't a project.
Right,
it might be a just do it, pardon the finger quotes, or I like to say a just PDSA it. Even if it's a small improvement, there's still a plan, do, study, adjust evaluation.
And I think that's a great example of something that's seemingly so small that actually has a pretty profound impact. That you, in KaiNexus, for instance, all of that terminology is configurable. So one, you're not using kind of generic task management or project management terminology, but two, you can actually tailor it to your organization and kind of brand it exactly the way you have been doing that work. So anyway, I think to wrap up this question also, Tanya, there's lots of different ways that you can get a demo in KaiNexus and really kind of open the hood, if you will, and take a look or take it for a test drive that I think will probably answer that even better. But
yeah, so we'll follow up with her. And from the domain address in her email, she's from the Dominican Republic, which goes to show how universal and global these continuous improvement approaches really are. So thank you. I think that's the first question we've gotten from the Dominican Republic. So thank you for that, Tanya. We've got a question that I believe comes from California. Lily asks, how do we measure engagement? Besides once every 2-year surveys, what about culture change? So, I mean, I think this is a question we get a lot. I know we've covered this in a previous Ask Us Anything, but the thing I really like going back to is measuring the number of implemented improvements. I think is a great real-time proxy for engagement and how successfully you're creating a culture of continuous improvement. And you can see those numbers go up. Maybe it's just fluctuating around an average. We could use process behavior charts and other methods to try to avoid overreacting to every up and down. But I think that is a really useful way of measuring engagement. I would still keep doing the surveys, but I would hope, there's certain things in those standard employee engagement surveys, like my ideas are valued at work and things like that. I would expect those survey indicators to skyrocket after 2 years of really practicing continuous improvement. What do you think, Greg?
I think that's excellent. You mentioned implemented improvements, and we have been, I think for 4 years now, been picking a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal out of the Collins writings. Writings, and that BHAG that we all have gotten behind, and we can't think of a better one every year, because it just means that the engagement of the cultures of all of our customers are doing well is number of completed improvements.
Yeah.
And we have been attempting to literally double that every year, and not double how many we did in the prior year, but double the amount we did in the history of KaiNexus every single year. And little worried we're going to miss it a little bit this year, but even missing it a little bit this year still means that we probably doubled or tripled from what we did last year. So I think that's an excellent way to measure engagement. I think what's interesting about this question also is that engagement really is a measure in many ways of culture, if you will, because when people say, oh, well, we don't have the right culture to be able to do that yet, I'm always confused by that. And I'm always like, well, how do you think you develop a culture? Culture is the summation of all of the actions we take. Right. I love the Seth Godin expression. He always says, culture is people like us do things like this. And so if you're trying to understand, why do you care about engagement? You care about engaging. You caring about engagement because you're trying to, create a culture. You're trying to make sure that everyone is participating. There's no better way than to see, well, are improvements being implemented. A couple of the other reports that we have in KaiNexus is kind of login rates. We have use systems. So you can see, I think there's two concepts for engagement, because, for example, I can start dissecting your completed improvements or your implemented improvements number. So for example, if I said, oh, well, an organization has 100 people and they did 100 improvements last year in organization A, and in organization B, they did 100 improvements and they have 100 people, and I asked you, well, which has a better culture, which has better engagement? You would say, oh, they're about the same. But what if I then told you that in organization A, it was 10 people that did all 100, but in organization B, it was 80 people that did all 100? What's better engagement? I would argue organization B is actually better engagement because far more people are involved.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of organizations focus on another thing you can measure is ideas per person per year. But you raise an interesting point. Percent participation might be something else to look at. And then there's the question of how you define participation. Right. Suggestion box systems, one of their downfalls was that one person got credit, where I think in healthy Kaizen cultures, like I saw again recently at Franciscan Health in Indianapolis, and a lot of our KaiNexus customers do this, if you had input, if you participated in some way, that counts as participation, because why not? Why not give that recognition and credit?
Because there's some people that are really good at the initial observation, and then there's some people that are really good at the creative problem solving. There's some people really good at implementing. There's some people really good at just communicating and broadcasting a success and trying to spread that to other areas of the organization. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, by all means, do not punish people because they don't have the idea or they weren't the primary implementer. To me, it's as long as they're participating in some way, I think people should get, to use the quotes, credit for participating.
And along those lines, part of the point of a big, hairy, audacious goal is you don't punish people for not hitting the big, hairy, audacious goal. It's like what some people might call a stretch goal. It's meant to help drive efforts to, there's an old, I think it's the old Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame Super Bowl winning coach Vince Lombardi. I'm paraphrasing it. When we aim for perfection, we might achieve excellence.
I love that.
That's fine, right? Nobody's perfect. Toyota's not.
It's not a zero-sum game kind of equation. So,
yeah. Okay, so we got a question from Arnaldo, who works in the financial services industry, which is interesting to see. How do you start a successful deployment of an OpEx or operational excellence culture? What are some of the must-dos and the steps to avoid on this journey? So, I would add, especially if you're in a large, really distributed organization, or even if you're a single site that's really large, like a hospital or a factory, there's something to be said for starting somewhere. That you have a model area where you're trying to create an OpEx culture, a culture of continuous improvement, a lean management system, whatever you want to call it, and try to prove that it works, and then try to spread and roll it out from there. I think though there's risk if you're starting locally and very senior executives aren't on board with principles and mindsets and approaches, that the great work you're doing locally in a model area could inadvertently get squashed by the predominant culture of the organization. So I think you can start somewhere, but I think it's ideal to start when you've got that upper level support that says, yes, this is the vision for the whole company, but we're going to start somewhere, instead of trying to roll it out and change the culture through proclamation. I think that doesn't work.
And I think it's important to note that if you're in a huge organization, getting leadership buy-in / getting them on board, that doesn't have to be in the top echelons. If you're in a place that has 500 people at in this area, by all means, getting the leaders at that level. I think that naturally the highest up, most, I'll use the word powerful, probably the right word is influential leader is really ideal. But don't not do it because you have a leader of 50 or 100 people. I think the important thing is that leader recognizes that one of the goals that they're going to have is get their model cell going and then go up even higher up in the organization, because to get the whole organization on board, we see it over and over and over. You have to have leadership, participation, not just rubber stamp, but actual daily, in some way, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes a day, but it has to be front of mind.
Yeah. So we won't be able to squeeze in one more question, and then we'll make a few announcements.
Can I just say 2 other things on that question? Yeah. Steps to avoid. I would, don't overanalyze something. So don't spend 2 years trying to create the perfect system, and we're going to put everyone through 2 days of training, and then once finally everyone's there, then we haven't seen that work. So come up with the realization that you're going to be going from kind of model cell, whether it's 20, 50, 100, 200 people, and then going and doing that as a PDSA pretty rapidly. As the more rapid you can do it in a meaningful way, the more you'll learn as an organization. So
that's
if you say, oh, we're going to take 2 years to plan on doing this, well, that's the wrong step. But also, if you think you're going to spread this to 10,000 people in 2 weeks, that's also, there's going to be a Goldilocks sort of thing here. So, and it's going to relate to what's the need of the organization, what's the support of the leadership, and how much resources the organization is going to put to this. I can almost see like a 3 variable kind of graph being made on how quickly you can go based on those 3 points. Okay, sorry, those were the other 2 things I wanted to make sure we talked about.
Great addition there. So our final question comes. There's another question from Lynn, who's from Vietnam, and she's I think it's she, but Lynn has asked questions before. Apologize if I said she incorrectly. But what are the success criteria of a continuous improvement organization in terms of leaders, skills, behaviors, etc.? So that reminds us of something we talk about a lot at KaiNexus and always have, right, Greg?
Yeah, there's what we've noticed, and this has been, I think, a really fun part of this journey that we've been on, and Mark has been on it as long as almost anyone at KaiNexus other than Matt or I, and we just preceded him just by a little bit, is that we've learned a lot. I mean, aside from literally speaking with thousands of organizations, we've had the opportunity to work with hundreds of organizations now, and we've had the opportunity to understand what are the elements that we see consistently in organizations that are doing activity and doing work that I think 10 out of 10 people would say, well, that's successful. If we could do that at our organization, that's successful, or we're successful and we do that. And it really revolves around 3 areas. And there's behaviors, which is really the people. I mean, it's this kind of concept of people, process, and technology, right? So it's behaviors of people, and we really focus on the behaviors of leaders, because if the leaders have the right behaviors, it will create ultimately a methodology. And if you keep that methodology simple, between the people and the methodology, you will create a culture of improvement. And then you're obviously not going to, this is not going to be an oral tradition. It's going to need to be logged and communicated. And if your technology that you pick can help support that, you're gonna see that explosion. And so we've talked before in the past about, well, what's technology? Well, paper's technology. It was only invented 600 years ago, and our printing was only invented 600 years ago in a meaningful way. And obviously Word and Excel and bulletin boards, those are all technologies that we're using. And so just make sure you're using a technology that really makes this work, and tracking the work and reporting on the work easier, because the more the technology can help you do those, the higher the success you're going to have in your organization. And so that's to me what you're going to realize with the success criteria. When you have those three things in sync, there's going to be an explosion, if you will, or certainly a significant momentum.
Right. Then people's minds might be blown. They say, right? A good explosion. All right. So yeah. So that was well said. So I'm fully aligned with what you said. So we'll just leave it at that because we are at the bottom of the hour. We try to keep these fairly short. We will do one again pretty soon. Hopefully, we tend to do these about every 2 months or so. We've got questions coming up there in the queue here from Canada, the US, Vietnam again, Denmark, healthcare, different industries. So it's really cool to see. So I want to thank everybody for the questions and thank you for tuning in. I want to tell you real quickly about a couple of upcoming webinars for KaiNexus customers. But this is coming up on October 31st, the KaiNexus training team office hours with Ryan Rippey and Matt Banna. Are they going to wear costumes, Greg?
I'll have to ask.
I mean, it is October 31st. So again, KaiNexus users, KaiNexus customers, you can register for that at kainexus.com/webinars. And then open to everybody, our next presentation style webinar. These are hour-long webinars, also at 1 o'clock Eastern. On November 19th, there's a webinar titled Leadership Behaviors to Guide Effective Change. And that's going to be presented by Ritu Ward. She is a regional vice president for Mercy Labs. So she's in the healthcare industry. She's a medical technologist. She's a Six Sigma black belt. She's a fellow in the American College of Healthcare Executives. So she's quite accomplished. And like our other presenters, I'm sure she's going to have a lot of great stuff to share. So again, you can go kainexus.com/webinars and you can register right now. So Greg, I'll let you go ahead and wrap up. I always stumble with, I know there's a certain way we like to try to end these things, and I'll let you do it because Rippey and Banna do it better than I do. And
well, yeah, there's no way we're going to be able to compete with those professionals. So, well, I usually like to indicate that there is no better day than today than to start spreading continuous improvement. So keep on keeping on, and we'll see you Kai next time.
There it is. That's the line. We'll see you Kai next time. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Mark.